Chapter 14. What do you think of the place? Jimmy asked as he led the way through the corridor and outside to follow another covered walkway through the terrace gardens. Steele did not reply, his eyes wandering across the plants as he breathed in the fresh and moist air. The rain had lessened and the humidity had increased, though it was not as muggy as it could have been, for a light breeze blew from the north. Down among the streets of East Point and other built-up areas of the city, the humidity would have been stifling. "Well," Jimmy insisted, looking over his shoulder. Seems nice enough," Steele shrugged, his disinterest obvious. "I said it before and I'll say it again. The Huntsman's Lodge is the best gentleman's club in the city," Jimmy declared loudly, accentuating his point by lifting a finger into the air. "Everything here, quiet lounges for a sit and drink, games room for some friendly gambling, massage rooms for a rub and tug, saunas, private balls, meeting rooms for corporate functions, and even one of the best restaurants in all of Eden. You can also find more illicit dealings here, for the right price, of course. But that's very hush-hush. You don't want the cops getting wind of that side of the club. Do you know Mr. Van Demont says it's one of his favorite places in the city?" "I bet it is," Steele mumbled, clearly unimpressed. As he looked about the gardens, though, Steele had to admit the atmosphere was a lot nicer than the grimy city streets and back alleyways. Despite the more illicit qualities of the club that Jimmy had glossed over, it was a place that Steele could see himself enjoying, more for the tranquil surroundings and pleasant air than anything else. As they walked to the higher terraces in the gardens, Steele spied a few men in expensive suits being escorted by one or two women to private rooms. In fact, he even saw a woman wearing a suit being shown to one of the rooms. "As you can see," Jimmy said, his voice growing a bit lower, spotting the corporate woman as well, "we accept all clients here so long as they're gentlemen and have money. We don't discriminate." Steele did not reply, following Jimmy up the flight of stairs that headed towards the highest terrace. Beside the walkway ran a running stream, gushing over shortfalls into little pools as it ran down from the grand building at the top of the stairs. It was to this building that Jimmy was heading, and Steele could see that this building was clearly the penthouse suite of the club that only the richest and most influential people could use. Obviously, this is where Benedict van Demont was staying. As they reached the top of the stairs, Jimmy pushed through the doors, led the way into a luxury suite that was wide and open, filled with only the finest things. There was a large bar, lounges in front of a large television, and a long dining table with many chairs. On the left as they entered, a short hall led to a bedroom, and opposite the entrance a huge room moved into a private garden. Next to the bedroom was another open door that looked like it led into the large study or conference room. As soon as he entered, though, Steele's attention was drawn to the back decking and private garden. The decking was covered and there were many seats, where a few women sat, drinking and talking quietly. To the right, just outside the door, the covered deck led towards a large game room that looked to be nearly the same size as the main room. Down a few steps from the decking was an open courtyard with gardens and a natural pool, and in the centre was Benedict van Demont. Out in the rain, the man was wearing simple pants with no top covering his torso. A slight frown came to Steele's brow as he looked at the man. Benedict was nearly over 50, his neatly trimmed hair and beard as white as snow. But it was clear the man took good care of his health. His frame was lean and still well built, covered in tattoos and several large scars. But what drew Steele's attention the most was what Benedict was doing. The man was practicing martial arts. It was a different style to what Steele knew, but the movements Benedict was going through were effective and powerful. His feet moved with purpose, planting a strong base to execute powerful punches and kicks. The style was familiar to Steele, and he recognized the techniques. Jimmy stopped at the edge of the cover and motioned for Steele to do the same as they waited patiently for Benedict to stop and notice them. A strange feeling came to Steele as he waited and looked about, realizing that what Benedict had was almost a mirror image of his own desires. Indeed, he could see himself at 50 in almost this exact situation. Benedict gave the impression he was a man turning 22, with 30-odd years of life experience. His hairstyle was one that looked more comfortable on a 20-year-old, and his tattoos were of images and symbols that university students would get on their skin. Immediately, though, it seemed that Benedict was not pretending to be this way. He was not bitterly holding on to his youth. Rather, it was the opposite. Benedict stopped and noticed him then, a youthful glint coming to his dark eyes. "Jimmy!" Benedict exclaimed, coming from the courtyard into the decking. "Who's this with you?" The two women who had been sitting swiftly got to their feet and began wiping Benedict down with soft towels, and the man fixed his beard and moustache. Pinching the ends of his moustache between his finger and thumb, he twisted the hairs together and pulled them towards his ears, creating a pencil style with slight handlebars. "This is Reinhardt Steele," Jimmy said, motioning to Steele, "an up-and-coming member of my crew. I invited him here to see what hard work will get him." There it was, the real reason why Jimmy had brought him to this club. He shot Jimmy a slight glare before extending a friendly hand towards Benedict. "Pleased to meet you," Steele said, though his words sounded hollow to his ears. In truth, he cared little about the politics of the company, but Benedict was a man with great power in the city, so it was best to make a good impression. "And you?" Benedict replied, his eyes narrowing slightly as he shook Steele's hand and regarded him closely. Benedict was slightly taller than Steele, his frame leaner, which actually made him seem smaller. Not that Steele was carrying much bulk, and most would consider him rather lean as well. It was more that Steele had a greater presence about him. "Are you enjoying your day, Mr. Van Demont?" Jimmy asked politely. "Get that cigar out of my face," Benedict said harshly, causing Jimmy to rush to snuff out his cigar and slip it into his jacket pocket. Turning away, Benedict grabbed a light shirt that had been on the table and slipped it over his head before adjusting his hair and beard again. "Jimmy has told me a bit about you, Steele," Benedict said without turning. "Good potential, I believe is what he said." As he spoke, Benedict walked with the two women into the main room, forcing Jimmy and Steele to follow. "Well, that doesn't concern me much," Benedict continued, moving to the lounge where another woman brought a plate of fruit and drink from behind the bar. "Do as you're told. Don't do anything stupid, and you'll make a lot of money. It's as simple as that. Now, Jimmy, if you intend on making your quarterly target, you'd better up your game. You're behind several million already. Clara looks like she'll be making the most this time. Your little side deal was a failure, and I hear you invested a good deal of money into it." As he spoke, Benedict sat down on the couch as the woman placed a plate of food on the coffee table before them. The man was quick to start on the assortment of fruit and nuts, taking a long drink of some type of smoothie to wash down a handful of pills, likely multivitamins and other healthy supplements. "And don't you worry, sir," Jimmy stammered awkwardly. "I'll meet the quota in time. We've had a few setbacks this month, and that deal was Clara's fault. If she hadn't interrupted, it would have gone smoothly." Jimmy continued to try and string together his excuses, but still was distracted by his phone and did not hear the rest. A feeling of excitement swelled in his gut as he saw the message was from Reeves, and he quickly opened it to read. "Knox is awake. Doctors say he'll make a full recovery with no problems." The message brought a smile to Steele's face, and he tried to think of the best way to excuse himself from Jimmy and Benedict. "If there was a mole in my group, that'd already be dead," Jimmy was arguing, and Benedict was scowling when Steele focused on the conversation once more. "It's gotta be Clara." Benedict's frown deepened, and his eyes moved to Steele. "What do you think, Steele?" Benedict asked seriously. "Is there a mole in the company? Who is it?" "I only joined recently," Steele shrugged, and Jimmy had to coerce me into joining, so I can't really speak from a point of understanding. "Then speak one from ignorance," Benedict cut in firmly. It's hard to say," Steele narrowed his eyes slightly. "Naturally, I look like the perfect covert officer among the company's ranks, due to my sudden arrival. But Jimmy and I have already discussed this." The wound Jimmy had caused on Steele's arm ached and made him subconsciously scratch at the formed scab. "So, as to who it could be, I don't know," Steele continued, "but that's assuming there is one, which is doubtful." "Doubtful?" Jimmy demanded, his voice rising as anger flashed in his eyes. "The hell would you—" "Let him speak." Benedict spoke up, and Jimmy instantly fell silent and fixed Steele with a furious glare. "Jimmy thinks that because the police came to his deal, there's a mole, yes?" Steele stated more than asked. "But the police have always watched known members of the company, and no doubt Jimmy's unexpected deal to undermine Clara caught their attention. So, naturally, they took the opportunity." That's ludicrous, Jimmy snapped, turning back to Benedict as if he pleading. I took the proper precautions. There's no way the police caught wind of my deal. Clara did, Benedict stated simply, his tone cold. So either your precautions were flawed, or there is a mole in your crew, Jimmy. Which brings my attention back to you, Steele. I assume you know my history, as does Jimmy, Steele said flatly, causing the man's eyes to narrow. I have no interest in aiding the so-called justice system of Eden, but I also have no real intention of aiding the company either. My focus is the money. Very practical, Benedict smirked slightly. Unbelievable enough. But Jimmy has also told me of your friendship with Templeton Knox, and he's a known associate with Clara. That could suggest you inadvertently leaked the information to Jimmy's deal to Knox, and then he passed it on to Clara, or the police. I'll bet that little gigolo did too, Jimmy exclaimed as if he had suddenly found the truth. Don't, Steele growled, something in his mind snapping as he roughly grabbed Jimmy by the collar to bring the man's eyes to his. Don't insult Knox in my presence after what you let your brother do to him. The weight of his voice and gleam in his eye caused Jimmy to falter and almost cower away, but the gangster gathered his wits swiftly, and a look of outrage came to his face. You dare threaten me? Jimmy roared, knocking Steele's hand away as he tried to match the glare. Jimmy was shorter than Steele, who just crested 6-foot margin, and although Jimmy was fatter, he could not compete with Steele's presence. Benedict laughed aloud, grabbing Jimmy's attention and causing him to push his rage aside. Steele was not so easily swayed and held his glare on Jimmy before the man broke it and lowered his gaze as he looked to Benedict. Well said, boy, Benedict laughed, pointing to Steele. You've got some balls and loyalty. That could be good in this business, but take my advice. Don't trust anyone, especially your so-called friends. They'll stab you in the back just as easily as breathing, and when it comes to times that matter, you can rely only on yourself. Steele did not reply, his hard gaze moving between Benedict and Jimmy, who was still silently scowling at him. All right, Benedict said, getting to his feet, with all 3 women beside him. You two leave me now. I have things to attend to. We'll talk later, Jimmy. Benedict waved them off then and headed towards the bedroom with the women. The man clearly had nothing more to say and clearly expected Steele and Jimmy just to leave on his command. Move it, Jimmy hissed at Steele as he walked past and towards the doors. Steele did not need to be convinced, and his mind returned to wanting to go to the hospital and to see how Knox was doing. Just outside, after Jimmy closed the doors to the villa, he wheeled on Steele, grabbing him by the collar and producing a knife from his belt to hold at Steele's cheek. Steele's first instincts were to defend himself, disarm Jimmy, and leave the man with a broken wrist, but he held back. Jimmy had no intention of stabbing him, only to threaten. You ever act like that towards me again, I'll put you in the hospital's bed beside your slut of a friend, Jimmy said through gritted teeth. White fury swelled within Steele's gut, and he struggled to keep his temper in check. He managed to keep from lashing out, but the look in his eyes told Jimmy exactly what he was thinking. Jimmy slowly eased back and slipped the knife away, but his expression remained hard. Come on, Jimmy huffed, his temper high as he took the lead back through the complex. Can you believe this? Clara screws everything up and Benedict blames me for being behind on my payments. You better be of use to me in Clara's group, Steele. What happened to your apologetic nature? Steele asked sarcastically, causing Jimmy to scowl at him again. Perhaps you should be more grateful, Jimmy snapped. I brought you here, apologized for Frankie's stupidity, introduced you to Benedict, and how do you repay me? By making me look like a fool in front of Benedict. Give me one good reason why I should let you walk out of here alive. Steele narrowed his eyes and stopped at the base of the stairs, and they turned to each other. It was clear in Steele's eyes that Frankie was not the only one in the Pierce family who suffered from wild emotional swings and a short temper. I am your mole in Clara's group, Steele said flatly, as if it were obvious. And what's that got me? Jimmy hissed, his posture hunched over and aggressive. I did only join. Steele frowned. They don't trust me yet. Jimmy bared his teeth and turned away, his agitation clear. Although, Steele said thoughtfully, drawing Jimmy back to him, I might have heard something. What? Jimmy demanded, jumping at the bait. Just a rumor, really. Steele shrugged and looked away. I doubt it's anything. I probably shouldn't have brought it up. Spit it out already. Jimmy glared at him. I think she might have some kind of small deal happening early next week, Steele said casually. Guns or something. Guns? Jimmy frowned. His eyes darted about as his mind worked furiously. That bitch? She's trying to get some firepower to rival me, I'll bet. What are the details, Steele? I told you I don't know, he replied, and Jimmy growled angrily. Then you best find out quick, Jimmy said sternly before a slight smile came to his face. Think of it, Steele. We can get one back on Clara. That ugly bitch won't see it coming. She thinks she can bring in guns without anyone knowing. We'll get her this time. Come on, let's have a drink. With a laugh, Jimmy threw an arm around Steele's shoulders, once again seeming jovial. I need to get going, Steele said, gently removing Jimmy's arm and bringing a frown to the man's face. You want details on this deal, right? Good point, Jimmy agreed, nodding his head as he took out a cigar and lit it up. Get going. And Steele, you better not screw me over. I know, Steele sighed heavily, turning away from Jimmy's scowl. You've said it 1,000 times already. You know, Steele, Jimmy said darkly, stopping him before he went 2 steps and drawing his attention back again. One of these days, your usefulness will run out. So if I were you, I'd improve my attitude towards my betters. If you don't, you'll end up 6 feet under. You follow me? I'd better keep myself useful then, Steele replied flatly before he turned away, feeling Jimmy's glare following him. As he headed back through the first building, he contemplated Jimmy's words. It was true that he was playing a dangerous game, but he was playing to win, and as far as Steele was concerned, it was Jimmy that needed to keep an eye out. But Jimmy would never see the final blow coming. He was not sharp enough. The limousine he arrived in was no longer available, so he was forced to call a taxi and wandered down to the front gate as he waited. The rain had almost stopped, and the humidity had increased all the more as the hour was passing midday. Although this venture to the Huntsman's Lodge had been unexpected, it had worked out well enough. Jimmy was focused on Clara's deal, and now it was only a matter of time until everything fell into place. There was still much to be done, but now his thoughts returned to Knox, and he was eager to see how his friend was faring.